Thank you, thank you. What do you mean, ha? Who said that? Okay, I don't sing so good. Well, my wife says that. I mean, I do a wonderful job in the bath, but she says I sing off key. But then, you know, we've only been together 50 years. How would she know? Look. When I was a kid in Sunday school, I could not wait for that flip chart to go over and for that wonderful picture of Jesus entering Jerusalem. I thought in my youthful imagination, and I had a youthful imagination, in my youthful imagination, could there be anything greater than to have such a wonderful, triumphal entry? Everybody applauding, everybody delighted to see me, and so grateful that I'd come to deliver this message. As you see, I had even at that age delusions of grandeur. But it wasn't until later on, when I did some serious study of the Bible and Bible history, that I realized that that triumphal entry was not as triumphal as we imagine. As a matter of fact, it's triumphal for Christians to view that, but Jesus was not a Christian. Now, people say, what's he talking about? Jesus was a Jew. He was a Jewish teacher. We call him a rabbi. He didn't know, one presumes, he was founding a new religion. He was trying to reform the religion to which he belonged. And the religionists whom he knew, his co-religionists, what did they want? What were they looking for on that day? Many of them were looking for a conquering Messiah. They didn't want Jesus, the great master teacher that they'd admired in the provinces. They didn't want him coming into here, the very heart and seat of their religious movement. They didn't want a wimp. They wanted King David. Redivivus, a little Latinism there. But they wanted Jesus mounted on a white charger to match that of the Roman governor. They wanted him to carry a sword. They would gather behind him. They would drive out the hated Roman occupiers of Palestine and reclaim their land, rebuild their great Jewish nation. But Jesus wasn't that kind of person, and he didn't want to do that kind of job. Look, there's a beautifully poignant verse. Most people miss it. It's in Luke. It's in the 19th chapter. When Jesus came in sight of the city that he was to enter, Jerusalem, the city of peace, Shalom. When Jesus came in sight of the city, he wept. He wept. It's a fancy word to say he cried. He said, "If only you had known on this great day the way that leads to peace. But no, it is hidden from your sight." And he goes on to predict that Jerusalem will fall to its enemies. He was a man of peace. He came to bring peace. He came to teach us about the inner peace, the peace that we should find in ourselves, not the peace that was granted us by others, not a peace won in battle or in war by treaty. No, something deep and inner and abiding. He chose to come into that city not on a white horse, but on a colt, an immature creature. Not a creature that one would conquer on. No great conqueror in history, no Alexander, no Napoleon ever rode a colt into battle. No, they want to be laughed out of business. They're the biggest chargers you could find. So he showed right at the beginning. He said, nobody believed him. He said, "My kingdom is not of this world." He said that. But nobody believed him. And his co-religionists, they thought he was going to come into that city and that they were going to gather behind him and that they were going to drive the Romans out back to, well, wouldn't drive them back to Rome because the Romans were too sensible. They always sent colonial troops to govern the colonies. Good thinking, one would assume. But his vision was of something entirely different, something so wonderfully spiritually centered and so wonderfully innate that most people, of course, missed the point. Right into that experience in Jerusalem, even after the entry. In the garden, one of his disciples had brought a sword. And where he got the sword, it was very difficult to get a sword in those days if you weren't a Roman. The Romans, in fact, actually forbade most Jewish people to carry swords, except temple guards, because it was an offensive instrument. Not only that, but it was a very expensive one to procure. And yet somebody in the garden has a sword and says, come on, let's, now's the moment. Now, put aside all this wimpish nonsense. I mean, come on, let's bash the hell out of the Romans. There's even a school of thought in Bible history and even in theology that says when Judas betrayed Jesus, it was actually a positive act because Jesus ought to, by that denunciation, have revealed his true self and said, okay, the play acting's over, folks. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Let's bash them and bash them and bash them. But he didn't. He went ahead with what he knew to be the truth, that the only salvation for our kind is to live in peace one with the other and to live in peace with ourselves. He knew that. He had learned that. One of the greatest lessons that's ever come down to us over 2 millennia, in which even today we haven't grasped. But he knew it. And so people were disappointed. Well, I'm very disappointed in this Jeshua Bar Joseph, which was his name. I'm very disappointed. I expected much greater things of him. Come on, let's go home. No, that's not what he was going to do. But he teaches us a lesson because he tells us that so many times in our lives we are disappointed in ourselves because we have not achieved perhaps what others have in store for us. Has it occurred to you that we spend a lot of our lives as the bottom line in somebody else's agenda? Has that occurred to you? Yeah? Okay, all right. It's true. And so we're always trying to live up to somebody else's expectations for us. Yes. Oh, wouldn't it? The other day I flew up from Florida. I was down in Naples where I had a church, Unity Church. I flew up to Detroit from Naples. Oh. Well, they did let the plane land. Anyway, I flew up there, and there was this dear woman next to me, and for most of the trip, I had to listen to a litany of her disappointment over her son. Her son had not achieved the goals that she had set out. I began to feel very, very sorry for this poor guy. I thought, but gee, bless his dear, lovely heart, whoever he is and wherever he is, maybe he should be following his own star and not the one that his mom has set for him. But, well, I didn't. Yeah, I'm a great listener, most of the time anyway. The point is, disappointment is with us very much. It's in our hearts for many, many different reasons, whether it's been inculcated or whether we've just picked it up. And this is the time of Lent, remember. We're still in Lent. And in Unity, what we do in Lent is get rid not of chocolate cake desires, not of cravings for chocolate macadamia nuts, which I have rediscovered since I came here. Why am I spending $3 for 2 chocolate macadamia nuts at ABC? Gee, I wish I had shares in some macadamia nut factory someplace. No, we don't give up things like that during Lent, although we might very well for our own benefit. We give up states of mind. That's what we give up in Lent, in Unity. We deny the hold over us of states of mind. Mr. Fillmore, our co-founder, said, he said, nothing can take over your life unless you let it. And I believe what he said, but we let a lot of things take over our lives, including cravings for chocolate macadamia nuts. Anyway, we do experience disappointment in our lives, which is tragic in many ways, because when we do, we diminish our own capacities to serve God and to be channels through which God's good may come. I've told a story at the last 2 services, and I'll tell you again, it's a facetious story in part, although it is true, about a big disappointment that I experienced some years ago. I was in another Unity church, quite a long way from here, the state shall be nameless, and I had done some useful deed for a congregant I do dislike that word congregant, but then it's a neologism that we have to live with. I had done some useful deed for a congregant, and in his desire to appreciate me, he took me to lunch, which was quite acceptable. And then on the way back to my office, he pulled the car into the parking lot, and he reached into the glove compartment, and he pulled out a little box. One of those lovely boxes that is sort of velveteen. You know those boxes that look as though they might contain something precious. Just like the tab that's presented to us in a very upmarket restaurant. Why is it always the bigger the leather wallet, the worse you know the shock's going to be? Why? I was very excited by this, and he said, "I'd like to give you a token of my appreciation." Of course, no. You know, utterly hypocritical, of course, because I was looking forward to seeing. No. I'm a very, very bad receiver. I should be a good receiver, but I'm not. No. See, this is something of the whole disappointment thing. No. I'm not worthy. Oh, I'm not worthy of your largesse. I didn't say that. I said, oh, no, I can't. No, he said, I'd like you to have this as a token of my appreciation. And he opened the box. A Rolex watch. Now, you know, I'm not attracted to material things, but a 17 grand Rolex. I mean, you can see them out there on the beach. There's a store. This model I'm wearing it, 17 grand. Look at that. Diamond chips, the whole shebang. Beautiful. I said, you know, after the ritual sort of, no. I said, thank you very much. And, you know, I took it and, you know, I wore it for a couple of years. And then I happened to be in London. And I looked down at my watch. I had an appointment, and I looked down at my watch, and it had stopped. Which is totally unacceptable. So, in righteous indignation, fired with frustration and disappointment, I found the Rolex dealer, a Bond Street jeweler. And if you've ever been to London, Bond Street is where you go, I mean, the Queen's jewelers there and all that nonsense. And so I found the Rolex store, and I went in there, and I went to a long store, and I walked to the end of it, and I said, look here, my man. I said, I have here a Rolex watch, and it's stopped working. He was genuinely disturbed. He took it from me as one might take a precious egg. There's something that, sort of a great auk egg or something, from some bird that's long extinct, and so looks at it and puts it in his little glass. And then he straightened up. He said, "Sir may not be aware that Rolex does not manufacture battery-powered watches." Like Charles Lawton, you know. And he then took it, as I said this morning earlier, rather like a dead mouse that one's found behind an icebox, you know, sort of. And I had to leave the store, you know, I sort of walking there. I know when I closed the door that I heard laughter. Well, subsequently, my wife and I went to the great market in Bazaar in Istanbul, and we found we could pick one of these up actually for $15. They asked 25. This is the one I rely on, my $50 Kenneth Cole that I've had for 25 years. But anyway, when I go to an upmarket, when I go to a really posh restaurant, you know what posh means? Posh, lovely word. Port out, starboard home. Have you ever heard that? That's the origin of that word, posh. When the great P&O liner sailed out to India under sail in the 19th century, you always took a cabin that was port out, starboard home, if you could afford it, because that's the way the ship leaned with the prevailing winds. So you learned something this morning. So that's posh. So when I go to a posh restaurant, I sort of display this rather ostentatiously. And then I get the big leather wallet, you know. So I am myself no stranger to disappointment, but that's a story, and a facetious one in part, but very true, absolutely true. The point I want to make is that we, as individuals, need not be disappointed, especially if we fail to measure up to the agendas that others have set for us. When I was growing up, I went to a school where we had an unofficial motto. We had an official one, which I've forgotten. Must have been in Latin, and I've certainly forgotten it. But the unofficial was, the best is none too good. No matter how much you slave to produce, no matter how much you go to your teacher. We had all masters, no women who might crumble, in emotional collapse if we, these are sexist times I'm living in. We had masters who demanded that we produce more than we could produce. Looking back, I seem to remember that most of them could have done a better job, but that's beside the point. The best was none too good, and we humbly submitted, rather in a Dickensian fashion, our miserable scribblings. And we were told, the best is none too good. And that kind of silly mantra, when it's inculcated into a child, does stick. And I spent a lot of my life wondering why I couldn't measure up to what other people imagined that I should do. And then I found, of course, that center of inner peace. And I said, it really doesn't matter. Who the hell are these people, anyway? Heaven's sake. Am I not myself entitled to an identity? Am I not entitled myself to some goals and sense of what I'm worth and what I really want to do? And I think this is true for many of us. I'm not suggesting we up and change our jobs, that we go to the boss tomorrow morning and say, you have unrealistic expectations. I am quitting this job. I am going... Well, I didn't tell you to do that. You might do it, but that's up to you. All I'm saying is we need to realize that we are unique human beings. We're not partly unique. You can't be partly unique. I've heard people say, he's almost unique. That's rubbish. You're either unique or you're not. And we all, folks, every one of us, we are all unique human beings. We all have gifts, talents, abilities that nobody else has. You may not have touched those or discovered them. You may not believe that they are there, but they are there. And we are needed in this creative endeavor that we call the world. We weren't created as an experiment. I have a friend who thinks we're sort of psycho-images created by some mad scientist in the future, that we're part of some crazy IT game or something. Oh, yeah, well, he's happy thinking that. But we are created, I believe, passionately believe, by a creative energy that we call God, that we have that creative energy in us, that creative energy is all the time calling out on us, use me, let me flow into the world through you in ways that only you can discover and use. You may say, well, what have I got to give? A little old, plain old me. We switch on the television. There are these beautiful people wafting away and doing beautiful things. Well, I didn't establish the criteria of beauty. I'm not sure what beauty is, but I think beauty is in the soul, personally. But we seem these days to buy all kinds of images of beauty. There was some guy on the television the other day, some fancy actor, I can't remember his name. He said he was sorry he hadn't got a really good deal out of life because he was too beautiful. Did you hear that? He was too good-looking. Bravo. Bully for him. Look, we are all beautiful, wonderful souls created by God for a unique purpose, and some of us are lucky enough to discover that, and many of us need to discover it. We have purposes, amazing purposes, that only we can fulfill. Folks, it's so exciting. We needn't be disappointed in who we are. We needn't accept that anybody else should be disappointed in who we are. We are who we are. We are who we are. Children of God, filled with vital potential to bring joy and peace and fulfillment into the world. I don't care whether it's just a word to somebody on a bus. I don't care whether it's just a fleeting gesture. We can advance God's plan for this world, the beauty, the joy, the fulfillment, the satisfaction, the creative endeavor and energy, because we are a part of that wonderful endeavor itself. How could we be disappointed in that? Jesus wasn't disappointed in what he discovered, even though he disappointed a lot of people by discovering it. And we don't have to be disappointed either. We are God's children. God's children of infinite promise. Thank you, I'm finished, I'm done.